All right, folks. I guess we are live. Can you hear me? If you can hear me, can you just mention in the chat window that the audios and video is all good to go before we start? Great. So Chandravardhan, Sachin Tomar, I've gotten a few responses. Looks like everything is the audio video is good. Awesome, Aditya. That's great. Okay, so looks like everything is set. We will let's people are still joining in, so let's give them about a minute, and then we'll start. So of course, I'll give you an idea of the session, I'll introduce myself, and then we'll get started with the passages, which is the main agenda for today, right? So yeah, let's give folks a minute, one more minute, and then let's get started. Oh, I have a namesake, Jatin Gupta in chat. Good to meet you, Jatin. There are some interesting IDs as well on chat. I see an ID called as Physics Fun. Very nice. I wish there was something called English or Verbal Ability Fun as well. I'm kidding. But yeah, I mean that's pretty interesting. Great. I think let's get started, folks. I think quite a few have joined in, so let's get started. All right. So some of you might be seeing me or hearing from me for the first time. So let me just quickly introduce myself, folks. My name is Jatin. I am a verbal ability coach with 2IIM and Visaco, which is 2IIM's sister concern. And what I do is I take care of the verbal ability section. I coach people in verbal ability primarily for the CAT exam and GMAT. Of course, we cover all competitive exams, a lot of them, but primarily my focus is on the verbal ability section of both CAT and GMAT. Okay. Apart from verbal ability coaching, I also am a part of the team that takes care of the interview training. So as you would know, once you finish your CAT exam, you clear it, there is another stage that you have to clear, which is the personal interview stage. So I'm part of the team that takes care of the interview training. And then I conduct a bunch of mock interviews as well. So in the last season, that just completed, I conducted like quite a few interviews, and I'm happy to say that a lot of our students have made to some prestigious MBA schools. So, that's an amazing thing. So yeah, so that's my profile at 2IIM. I'm going to give you a bit of a background about myself. So I have about 18 plus years of corporate experience, out of which the last 12 plus years was spent at Google. So I was working at Google till July last year, which is when I quit. And in Google, I handled a number of roles. Of course, I was there for 12 plus years, which is a very long time, right? So multiple roles across sales, operations, digital marketing. Those were the three domains that I focused on. Training, of course, has been a recurrent theme in my career. So even in Google, although I wasn't a full-time trainer, there were a lot of part-time initiatives across these 12 plus years where I trained external clients, new Googlers coming in, and also tenured Googlers that were in the organization for a long time. So that was my the last 12 plus years, and before that I was a full-time IT trainer with an IT company. I used to take care of their programming training. So as you can see, training has sort of been a recurrent theme throughout my career. Now, the question that might pop up in your head is, why did I quit Google, right, after 12 plus years? So, of course, it's a great company, fantastic company. I had an amazing time. I learned tons. But what I realized is that, when I was working there towards the end of my tenure at Google, what I realized is that I have two passions in life, and that took a while for me to sort of figure out, right? I'm very passionate about teaching, and I'm very passionate about the English language. Right? Those are two things that I'm very, very passionate about in my life. So, the opportunity presented itself last year, and I was lucky enough to get that opportunity where I could take this decision to quit Google and pursue English teaching full time. Right? And that's why you see me here as a verbal ability coach. Of course, this is one of the streams. I take care of other things as well in the domain of English teaching. But yeah, that's what I decided that I'm going to sort of continue doing full time for the rest of my life. All right. Okay, so folks, so that's my background. At this stage, I would have loved to hear from you and get your introductions as well. That would have been amazing. But, due to the nature of the medium that we are on YouTube right now, so that won't be possible. And second thing is, there are quite a few, I think about, close to 100 people watching this live stream. So logistically, it won't be possible to hear from each one of you, right? But that said, I'm going to be conducting these sessions hopefully every week. So we'll get a lot of chances to interact in the future as well. And of course, if some of you, are not a part of 2IIM, and if you decide to join 2IIM in future, you'll see me a lot in your verbal ability classes, and then we'll have some excellent opportunities to interact. Okay. All right. So that's about me. Let's get started with the main agenda for today's session. Now, what we're going to do today, folks, is we are going to discuss two passages from the actual CAT exam which happened last year, right? So CAT 2020, we are going to pick two passages from that exam, and we're going to discuss today. So these are obviously actual CAT passages that appeared just last year, and they actually appeared in slot 1, right? So CAT last year, we had 3 slots, right? The morning, afternoon, and evening slot. So this was the first slot, and and verbal ability is the first section. So this is what students saw when the whole sort of adventure of CAT 2020 began. These are the first 2 passages, or the first section that they saw. We're going to pick 2 passages from that slot, and we're going to discuss it. Okay, so that's the agenda for today. Now, so what I'll do is, of course, the expectation was that I'm hoping you've read the passages already and you've come prepared. If you haven't, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you like 4 to 5 minutes to read the passage on your own. Okay, I'll show you the different slides as well. You can read the passage, take about 4 to 5 minutes, and then what we'll do is we'll read the passage together. Okay, so once you've read it, you will read it with me, we'll read it together, we'll understand it together, and then we'll go to the stage of solving questions. Does that sound good? Right? So, okay, so there are 2 ways to read right now. One, either you can click on the link in the description. So if you see the description of the video, there is a link which will point you to the passages, right? And we're going to discuss 2 passages. One is Anarchy, and second is about elephant seals, right? So we're going to start with Anarchy. If you want, you can click on that link and you can start reading Anarchy right now. Or I'll show you the slides one by one, and you can read it on the video also, right? But we're going to be quick because I'm hoping that most of you have read these passages in advance. But let's just go through it quickly, about 4 to 5 minutes, and then we'll read it together. Okay? All right. So let me take you to the passage. Let's go through the 1 second. Yeah. Okay. So this is your first slide, folks. This is how the passage begins. I will spend about 45 seconds to 1 minute on each slide. Read it here or click on the link and read the article fully. Take your time and read it. Okay. So go for it. Please start reading on your own, and then I'll switch in about a minute. All right, I'm going to go to the next slide now. Let's go to the next slide, folks. Let's move to the next slide. And yeah, that's it. So I think you've already seen this. Okay, so yeah, great. So this is the passage, folks. Let's just now, if you're looking at the PDF, finish reading it. Take about 30 seconds, and then what we're going to do is we're going to discuss this together. Okay. Great. Now, how did you guys find the passage? Can I get some responses on the chat? Just what was your experience when you read this passage? Did you find it simple? Did you find it complex? What's your impression of the passage? Any answers? There's a lot of silence on chat right now. Complex. Okay. All right, Jitesh, that's absolutely fine. Interesting. Amazing. Quite easy. Okay. All right. So I'm seeing varying opinions, which is great. Now, just one thing before we start discussing. See, if you are seeing a CAT passage for the first time, if you're reading or solving a CAT passage for the first time, you most likely you will find it complex. Okay. And that's simply because you don't have practice. Okay. So don't worry about that. Even if you're finding this passage complex or difficult to read, it's absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. Okay, that's because you haven't seen it or your reading skills are not up to the mark right now, which is absolutely fine. You have about 5.5 months, so you can always build your reading skills, and you will see that once you start reading regularly, passages like these will become easier to understand. So my point is, don't worry if you found this complex. Anyway, we're going to discuss it and read it together. Okay, so let's do that. All right. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to read this passage together. And one tip that I can give you is, so I always tell my students this, and I'm going to repeat that thing in probably every session. Please read every passage with a lot of interest, curiosity, and be an active reader. Okay, so show energy, exhibit a lot of energy when you're reading this passage, and read it with a lot of interest and curiosity. Now, that's because the moment you do that, your comprehension will increase. Right? This might sound like an absurd tip, but believe me, it works. So just tell your mind before beginning the passage that you're going to read it with a lot of curiosity, interest, and energy. You need to be an active reader. Okay, that will help you in comprehension. So that's one, and maintain that momentum throughout. And second is, what we're going to do is, which I would suggest you should try as well. It's also a great tip. If you want to increase your comprehension, what you can do is, after reading every paragraph, you can make a small note. Okay. It has to be a very small note. It doesn't have to be full sentences. And we take the note primarily to increase our comprehension. Simply because you've read the paragraph, and what you need to do is you need to summarize the main idea of the paragraph in a quick note. The moment you write it down, it will register in your brain. So primarily we are doing this to increase comprehension. So you'll see me doing that right now with every paragraph. I would suggest you can do it simultaneously. So if you have a notepad with you, just type a note for every paragraph. What is the main idea of the paragraph is what you need to summarize in a very quick sentence, not long sentences. Okay, let's get started. All right, what does it say? The word anarchy comes from the Greek anarchia, meaning contrary to authority or without a ruler, and was used in derogatory sense until 1840, when it was adopted by Pierre Joseph Proudhon to describe his political and social ideology. Okay, all right, so it introduces the term anarchy, right? What does it say? It says that the word anarchy, it explains to you the meaning, right? It says meaning contrary to authority or without a ruler. So even if you don't know the meaning of anarchy, you can understand it from this sentence. It just means anarchy is going against the authority or not having a ruler at all. That's what the passage is, that's what the sentence is saying. It was used in a derogatory sense until 1840. So till 1840, which is a long time ago, it was used in a derogatory sense. Derogatory sense means negative sense, right? Derogatory is negative. So it was used in a negative sense till you had Pierre Joseph Proudhon coming in, and he changed the whole sense from derogatory to positive because he used it to describe his political and social ideology, right? Okay, so that's what the sentence says. Proudhon argued that organization without government was both possible and desirable. That's how he changed it from negative to positive, because he said that you can have organization without government. It's not only possible, but desirable as well. That's the positive aspect. So you see the shift from negative to positive. In the evolution of political ideas, anarchism can be seen as an ultimate projection of both liberalism and socialism. Okay, and the differing strands of anarchist thought can be related to their emphasis on one or the other of these. Okay, so what they're saying is that Proudhon changed it from negative to positive, right? That was his job. And it also explains to you that anarchism is related to liberalism and socialism. Okay, because it says differing strands of anarchist thought can be related to the emphasis on either one of them. So basically what they're saying is anarchism borrows from both liberalism and socialism. So different parts of anarchism, different thoughts, it borrows from either liberalism or socialism is what the passage is saying. paragraph is saying. Okay, all right. Now let's try to summarize this main idea of the paragraph in a quick note. And this is what I was telling you. This will help you in comprehension. So what is this paragraph saying? Ask yourself, what is the main idea? One is, of course, it introduces anarchy, right? The meaning and everything. It talks about Proudhon, okay, which changed the sense from negative to positive. Because it was used in a derogatory sense, he changed it because he said it's not only possible but desirable as well. And it also talks about anarchism being related to two things: borrowing from liberalism and borrowing from socialism as well. If you were to talk about the main idea, these are the main points in the paragraph. Okay, so you can make a quick note here. You just have to scribble it. The moment you write it down, it registers in your brain. Okay, all right, let's move on. Historically, anarchism arose, okay, historically, so it's going to talk about what happened before, why did it arise and stuff like that. Historically, anarchism arose not only as an explanation of the gulf between the rich and the poor, okay, in any community, and of the reason why the poor have been obliged to fight for their share of common inheritance. Okay, so it's saying that anarchism arose not only because of this reason. So one reason is gulf between the rich and the poor. So gulf means a big difference. That's what gulf means here. Big difference between the rich and the poor. And the rich and the poor in any community usually have a big difference. Okay, so this is not the only reason for anarchism coming to being. Okay, but there is another reason. As a radical answer to the question, what went wrong, that followed the ultimate outcome of the French Revolution. Now take a few seconds to understand what this paragraph is saying. It's telling you why anarchism arose, or why anarchism, what sort of was given birth. It sort of started somewhere, right? So why did it start? So it's saying it's not only because of the difference between the rich and the poor and the gulf between the rich and the poor. So obviously when there is a huge difference between the rich and the poor can get angry, right? Because they are not getting the resources that rich is getting. So then that can lead to anarchy. But that's not the only reason. The other reason is, which is a radical answer. A radical is something which is very major and totally different. Another reason is it arose as a radical answer to the question, what went wrong, that followed the ultimate outcome of the French Revolution. So clearly the French Revolution's outcome was not what they expected. French Revolution happened. They expected a certain outcome. The outcome was totally different, and it was negative outcome. So the question they started asking the question, what went wrong with French Revolution? And in answering the question, anarchism came up. Okay, so there are two reasons here. If you were to just quickly summarize, right? It's talking about anarchism, the reason why it started. So not only the difference between rich and poor, okay, but that is a reason, but that's not the only reason. It's also, the second reason is the negative outcome of French Revolution. They didn't have a good outcome. They didn't have the outcome that they expected. They had a negative outcome, and because of that negative outcome, anarchism came into being. Okay, let's see if the passage further explains this. But that's the main idea till now. Let's proceed. It had ended not only with the reign of terror and the emergence of a newly rich ruling class. Now, when they say it, they're talking about the French Revolution. Okay, you can see it you can connect it to the previous part. So French Revolution had ended not only with the reign of terror and the emergence of a newly rich ruling caste, but with the new adored emperor Napoleon Bonaparte strutting through his conquered territories. Okay, now think about this. You have a French Revolution. What is a revolution? A revolution is a people uprising. Okay, so what people get frustrated, people get angry because of whatever reasons, and what they do is they target the government. They go against the government, or they go against their rulers. That is what a revolution is. So when people are fighting for something, okay, they expect a positive outcome out of that revolution, because any revolution is not easy, right? There's a lot at stake in a revolution. Right? A lot of damage happens. So they do that revolution, they come together, they expect a positive outcome. But unfortunately, what the passage is saying is with the French Revolution, it ended not only with the reign of terror, but the emergence of a newly rich ruling caste. There was a rich and poor. The poor were revolutionizing. They did all of this, and they ended up with terror and another rich ruling caste. So what happened? Something went wrong. They didn't expect that. That wasn't a positive outcome. And not only that, they also had another ruler, Napoleon Bonaparte, strutting through his conquered territories. So clearly the French Revolution went wrong, which gave rise to anarchism. Okay. All right, let's proceed. The anarchists and their precursors were unique on the political left in affirming. So precursors means pre is something that comes before. So you have anarchists, obviously you had something before anarchists. So they're talking about not only anarchists, but the sort of like the category of people before anarchists. So precursors is pre-anarchism. Okay. So the anarchists and the precursors were unique on the political left in affirming. Affirming is nothing but declaring. Okay. Declaring that workers and peasants, grasping the chance that arose to bring an end to centuries of exploitation and tyranny, were inevitably betrayed by the new class of politicians whose first priority was to re-establish a centralized state power. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack in this sentence. So see, the previous paragraph has already told you that the French Revolution went wrong and that gave rise to anarchism. So what this paragraph is doing is, it's further explaining that idea to you. So what it's saying is that anarchists and their precursors basically declared that the workers and peasants, right, who were involved in the revolution, these are the people who caused the revolution, the poor folks, right, against the rich and their rulers. They took a chance that presented themselves after centuries. A revolution is not something that happens again and again. It happens once in decades, once in centuries, after a lot of struggle. So these workers and peasants, after a lot of struggles, took a chance, they grasped the chance, right, to escape exploitation and tyranny, but they were inevitably betrayed by the new class of politicians. Because the new class of politicians that came up after the revolution, their first priority was to re-establish a centralized state of power. So they got rid of their existing rulers, but in return they got a new class of politicians, and the new class of politicians were focusing on power. They were not focusing on the poor people. So that's why the anarchists said that the poor people felt betrayed. Obviously, right? I mean, you do a revolution, you get together, you do a revolution, lives get lost, right? Property gets lost. There's so much of damage. And in the end, you go back to what you were before the revolution. Again, a new class of politicians, again focusing on power, not focusing on the poor. Right? So they were clearly not happy. They felt betrayed. The people in the revolution felt betrayed. Okay? All right. After every revolutionary uprising, usually one at a heavy cost for ordinary populations, see, it mentions that. And it's bound to happen. After every revolution, which is one at a heavy cost of the ordinary population or the poor population, the new rulers had no hesitation in applying violence and terror, secret police, and a professional army to maintain the control. These poor people fought. Instead what happens is a new class of politicians came in and they started applying violence and terror to maintain control to these people. So obviously the people felt betrayed. Okay, so if you look at the main idea of this paragraph, what it says is that the anarchists, okay, they affirmed, so they basically declared, okay, that the poor people were betrayed or felt betrayed, okay, by the new rulers. And this is again talking about the French Revolution. So it's obviously, it's not something which is, it's pretty serious, right? They felt betrayed and that gave rise to anarchism. Okay, let's proceed. Now, for anarchists, the state itself is the enemy. Okay, all right. And they have applied the same interpretation to the outcome of every revolution of the 19th and 20th centuries. So it's not only just French Revolution. Anarchists have applied the same interpretation to every revolution. So what they're basically saying is all the revolutions in the 19th and 20th century had a negative outcome. Okay. And as a result, for anarchists, the state itself is the enemy. The rulers, the politician itself is considered, anarchists consider them as an enemy. Because if you remember, the definition of anarchy was without a ruler. Right? So for them, the state itself is the enemy. That's why they don't want a ruler. Okay? This is not merely because every state keeps a watchful and sometimes punitive eye on its dissidents, but because every state protects the privileges of the powerful. So basically the paragraph is saying anarchists consider state as the enemy. Why do they consider them as an enemy? There are two reasons. Not because the state keeps a watchful and sometimes punitive eye on its dissidents. Dissidents are people that go against something. that are protesting. So here you have these poor folks who are going against the state. So those are dissidents. Punitive eye means if let's say the state is keeping a punitive eye on its dissidents, that means the state is punishing its dissidents. Punitive is connected to punishment. So that is not the only reason, right? That is not why anarchists consider state itself as the enemy. That's one reason. But also because every state protects the privileges of the powerful. That is also a problem that anarchists have against the state. So one is that the state keeps a watchful and punitive eye on its dissidents. Second is the state protects the privileges of the powerful and ignores the poor. That is the problem that anarchists have with the state, and that's why for them, state itself is the enemy. Okay, so let's make a quick note here. So basically what we are saying is for anarchists, state is the enemy. Right? And of course, there are two reasons which you can see. Okay, let's proceed. The mainstream of anarchist propaganda for more than a century has been anarchist communism. Okay, so now they're bringing in forms of anarchism. Okay, so they're saying the mainstream of anarchist propaganda. So the mainly anarchism was about anarchist communism. So they're bringing in sort of a type of anarchism or a version of anarchism, right? Anarchism is a philosophy. It can have different versions. So one of them is anarchist communism. So what does it say? Anarchist communism, which argues that property in land, natural resources, and the means of production should be held in mutual control by local communities. So what anarchist communism says is that these aspects, land, natural resources, and the means of production, should be held in mutual control by local communities. So you shouldn't have a central authority owning this, but this should be owned by communities. So again, the people. Right? So people getting together form different communities. The community should own this is what anarchist communism says. Remember, anarchism is against the state. Right? So they don't obviously want the state to own this. They want the people to own this. So communism says, community, they want communities to own this. Okay? Federating for innumerable joint purposes with other communes. Okay, so even if you don't know the meaning of federating, you can, from the context, you can understand what they're saying is, let these resources owned by communities and they will interact with other communities. They'll work in tandem. They'll collaborate. All these different communities will collaborate with each other and they'll help each other, is what they're saying. Okay. It differs from state socialism in opposing the concept of any central authority. Now, what does this mean? See, we already know that anarchism is against the state. State is the enemy. Okay. It clearly says it differs from state socialism. So state socialism is another philosophy. Right? So anarchist communism is different from state socialism because anarchist communism opposes the concept of any central authority. Okay? Now from this statement, you can infer that state socialism is okay with central authority. Anarchist communism is not okay with central authority, and that's why they differ. Right? So read that sentence carefully. You should be able to make this inference here. Right? It's saying it's different. And why is it different? Because anarchist communism opposes the concept. So obviously state socialism is okay with the concept of central authority. Right? Okay, so this paragraph is talking about anarchist communism, which is a form of, most likely a form of anarchism. Right? So it talks about what anarchist communist says. It's talking about community control. And it also gives you the difference with state socialism. So there are two main points here. You know what is anarchist communism all about? It's all about communities, but it differs from state socialism because state socialism is okay with central authority. Anarchist communism is not, obviously, because state is the enemy. Right? Pretty interesting. Let's proceed. This is the last part. Some anarchists prefer to distinguish between anarchist communism and collectivist anarchism. Okay, interesting. So now we had anarchist communism as one type of anarchism. Now we have something called as collectivist anarchism. Okay, so some anarchists prefer to distinguish. They say, okay, anarchist communism is different from collectivist anarchism. This happens, right? You have a philosophy, and as the philosophy sort of, spreads among people, you will keep having different versions, right? It happens with religion as well, right? You see religion also, within a religion also, you have different groups. So it happens with philosophy. It's typical. Now, why do they distinguish? In order to stress the obviously desirable freedom of an individual or family to possess the resources needed for living. while not implying the right to own the resources needed by others. Now remember, what is anarchist communism telling you? Anarchist communism says communities should own these resources, right? Collectivist anarchism says it's okay for an individual or family to possess the resources needed for living. An individual family needs the resources, it's okay for them to possess it. But it doesn't mean that they should own the resources needed by others. Only own what you need and let others own what they need. So this is where the difference between communism and collectivist anarchism comes. So you were talking about, you can say, if you want to take a note, you can say AC and CA. If you can remember you don't have to write full sentences. AC talks about communities. Okay. CA talks about individuals. And that is the difference between anarchist communism and collectivist anarchism. That's what the paragraph is talking about. Okay. All right. Last paragraph. There are unsurprisingly several traditions of individualist anarchism, one of them deriving from the conscious egoism of the German writer. Okay, there are unsurprisingly several traditions of individualist anarchism. Now there's another term. We have anarchist communism, collectivist anarchism. This is probably most likely the third form of anarchism that the passage is talking about. There are unsurprisingly several traditions of individualist anarchism, several traditions. So again, individualist anarchism also has different types. One of them derives from the conscious egoism of the German writer Max Stirner, and another one from a remarkable series of 19th century American figures who argued that in protecting our own autonomy and associating with others for common advantages, we are promoting the good of all. Now, don't get confused by this. Okay, this is in relation to what was discussed in the previous paragraph. See, we started by discussing communities, which is anarchist communism. Then it went to collectivist anarchism, where they started talking about individuals. So from communities, we moved to individuals. This is just extending that concept. So it's saying that there are several traditions of individualist anarchism. Okay. One derives from the German writers, second derives from the American figures. But what do they say? They argued that protecting our own autonomy and associating with others for common advantages, we are promoting the good for the all. Again, the focus is on individual. Do you see that? Right? There are different traditions of individualist anarchism, but they kind of sort of like agree on this thing that autonomy, which is nothing but concerned with individual control, is what autonomy is. Right? Protecting our own autonomy and associating with others for common advantages, we're promoting the good for all. So it's okay to have individual autonomy, but at the same time, you associate with others for common advantages. So again, that is where the focus is on the individual. Right? Again, different forms of individualist anarchism, but they kind of agree on this, that individual autonomy is okay. These thinkers, now when they say these thinkers, they're talking about individualist anarchists. These thinkers differed from free market liberals in their absolute mistrust of American capitalism and their emphasis on mutualism. Interesting statement. Understand it, right? If you're not used to this construction, it will confuse you. So slow down a little bit. These thinkers, which are individualist anarchists, differed from free market liberals. So they are different from free market liberals. How are they different? In their absolute mistrust of capitalism and their emphasis on mutualism. So basically what they're saying is that you have these individual anarchists, okay, who are different from free market liberals. And how are they different? Because free market liberals believe in capitalism and they don't emphasize on mutualism, whereas individual anarchists don't believe in capitalism and they emphasize on mutualism. Understand that sentence. It's different from free market liberals in their absolute mistrust of American capitalism. So it means as individual anarchists don't believe in capitalism, free market liberals are okay with capitalism. Individual anarchists emphasize on mutualism, free market liberals don't do that. That is where the difference is. Okay, so they're highlighting the difference between these two philosophies. All right. Okay, I'll answer the questions in a minute. I just want to summarize this passage, and then I'll answer your questions before we go to the questions. So see, once you're done with this exercise, right, and you've taken these small notes, what you should do is take a few seconds to sort of understand the main idea of the paragraph. You don't have to spend a lot of time, but you can just sort of try to, in your brain, just try to understand what is this passage telling me. You've looked at paragraphs, you looked at the flow. Now try to understand what is this passage telling you. So see, at this point in time, you can decide to look at your notes if you want, right? Either you can take notes. See, the primary reason is we are taking notes for comprehension, but you can always come back and look at the notes and understand the main idea of the passage before moving to the questions. Okay, so let's look at this. What does it start? Now I'm looking at notes. It spoke about the origin of anarchy. It talked about Proudhon, how he changed it from negative to positive. Then it says anarchism is kind of related. It borrows from liberalism and socialism. Okay. Then it talks about how did anarchism come into being? How did it rise? There were two reasons. Not only difference between rich and poor, but also the negative outcome of French Revolution. That's how it came to be. Now, then it talks about French Revolution. Again, it expands on that. The outcome of French Revolution was negative because there was terror and there was emergence of a newly rich ruling class and also Napoleon Bonaparte, connected to the previous point. Then the next paragraph talks about anarchists declared, now this was the declaration by anarchists, affirmation, right? That poor people were betrayed by the new rulers. They invested so much in the revolution. They lost lives. There was so much of damage, but they were betrayed by the new rulers because the new rulers started targeting them once they came into power. So that's why anarchists say that these poor people were betrayed by the new rulers. Okay. Then it goes on to talking about how anarchists consider state as their enemy. Okay, that's a very emphatic point there. Then it goes on to talking about different types of anarchism. So anarchist communism, which talks about community control. It also talks about the difference between state socialism. Then it goes to your collectivist communism. Just one second. Sorry. Collectivist anarchism, right? Again, it's difference because one is focusing on community, second is focusing on individual. And then it ends by talking about expanding on that individual idea and saying how individual anarchists is different from free market liberals. Okay, so if you look at the main idea of this passage, right, there is, of course, origin of anarchy, right? It talks about, of course, it's all about anarchy, right? That's very evident. So origin, then historically, how did it come to being? And then it talks about the different forms of anarchism, right? Communism, collectivist anarchism, and then finally individualist anarchism. That's the main idea of this passage. Okay, all right. I know I've taken quite some time to explain this, but I wanted to make sure you understand. Now I'm going to look at chat and see if you guys have any questions. Folks, any questions? Are you guys clear with the passage? If there are no questions, I'm happy to start with the discussing the questions. But if you have any questions, let's just quickly discuss that. Right. So there are some questions about speeding up the process. See, of course, there are different ways of speeding up the process. Right now, Gautam, we are focusing on accuracy, right? Accuracy over speed is what's important in the initial stages of your preparation. So let's focus on that. But of course, as you sort of practice and you get better with your reading skills, you will see that your speed keeps increasing. Okay. All right, great. So I don't see there are other questions. How to identify the main point in a particular paragraph? See, Atharva, that comes from you understanding the paragraph. The moment you understand the paragraph, let's say if you've taken sort of enough time to understand the paragraph, depending on your speed, right? You just have to ask yourself that question. What is the main point in this paragraph? What is the author trying to tell you in this paragraph, right? That is how you do it, and it comes with practice. The more you read and the more you take notes and the more you answer questions, it will, that sort of main point of the paragraph will become easier for you, right? But just ask yourself this question: what is the author trying to tell you in this particular paragraph? What's the main point? And just keep at it. It'll keep getting better. Okay, Shrurup has a specific question. Collectivist is somewhat same as individualist. Okay, yeah, interesting, Shrurup. That's a very good point. Let's look at that slide. So, is collectivist somewhat same as individualist? Okay, this is the slide that was talking about. You're absolutely right. Okay, and that's a very good inference that you've drawn. Because see, collectivist anarchism talks about individual, and then it goes on to talking about individualist anarchism. So definitely, collectivist anarchism has an individual element in it. Definitely, you're absolutely right. Okay, and that's how they've connected it. So they introduce the individual concept with collectivist and then go on to talking about different forms of individualist anarchism. Yeah, absolutely right. Okay, whether we should make notes after every paragraph, Anirudh, that's a good question. See, typically we do that for complex paragraphs, Anirudh, right? But what I would suggest is do it for each paragraph, right? See, the thing is, this is mostly a comprehension technique. Right? The moment you sort of take a small note, it will register in your brain and it will help you to maintain that flow. See, there are many students who say, oh, I start the passage, it's all okay, but when I continue, I lose track. And somebody said that in the chat as well. So if you take notes for every paragraph, it won't happen. So feel free to take it for every paragraph. Of course, if a paragraph is very straightforward, you can decide not to take a note. I will leave that to you depending on your comprehension and reading skills. Okay? All right. Rajit, collectivist is one whose need not for him but for the group, right? Okay, so see, if you look at the passage carefully, it starts by saying anarchist communism, which talks about communities. Collectivist anarchism talks about individual as well. So it talks about two things, right? It says it's okay for individual or family to possess the resources while not implying the right to own the resources needed by others. So I would say collectivist anarchism has a bit of both. See, at the end of the day, anarchism is against the state and it's for the people. So collectivist anarchism has a bit of both. It has the individual component, but it also has the others component. Anarchist communism is all about others, it's all about communities, right? So it has both the elements, is what I would say. Okay. All right, folks. Let's look at. Okay. There are some very weird comments on chat. Just ignore them. Okay. Great. Let's proceed. Let's look at the questions. Okay. Let's try to solve these questions together. Now, one thing, remember, when you come down to questions, slow down. Okay, because obviously the cat will try to trick you with questions and options. So be very careful when you're reading the question. Read each and every word slowly and read each and every word in the option slowly as well. Okay. Question 1. Which one of the following best expresses the similarity between American individualist anarchists and free market liberals, as well as the difference between the former and the latter? Okay, so this question is asking you two things. It's basically talking about similarity between American individual anarchists and free market liberals, as well as the difference between them. So you have to pick an option that gives you both the similarity and the difference, right? Now, if you've read this passage carefully, you should get a trigger that the passage has spoken about this, right? So if you've read it carefully, if you've taken notes, you will have a map in your head, so you'll immediately know where to go and hunt for this information. Right? So we know that somewhere towards the end, there was a comparison between American individualist anarchists and free market liberals. Right? Let's look at that. We can reread it. So the last paragraph, right? One second. Here they spoke about, you have your individualist anarchists, right? And the comparison between them and free market liberals. Okay? So actually you'll have to read this entire paragraph if you haven't understood it, but this is where the answer is, right? This talks about the difference. So they say that these thinkers, which is individualist anarchists, differed from free market liberals in their absolute mistrust of capitalism and their emphasis on mutualism, right? We took a note for that as well. Okay. So let's look at an option which basically summarizes that. Let's start with A. And believe me, by the way, you'll have to go through each option because the idea is to pick the best option. Even if you know the answer, and let's say if you've spotted this, please go through each option because you can always have a better option, right? And invariably in CAT, what happens is you'll end up with two options which are very close and you'll have to pick which is the best one. So go through every option. Let's do that. Both reject the regulatory power of the state, but the former and the latter. Okay, so what is former? Former is your individual anarchists. Okay. And latter is your free market liberals. If this is confusing you, you can always jot it down, okay? Because the options keep talking about former and latter. Both reject the regulatory power of the state, but the former favor a people state while the latter favors state intervention in markets. The latter favors state intervention in markets. Is there anywhere in the passage where it says that free market liberals favor state intervention in markets? There's no point like that. And you can go back and read it, right? You have the PDF, you have the, click on that link and read it. There is no point like that where they say that free market liberals favor state intervention in markets, right? So this is the wrong option. This can't be your correct answer. Let's remove that. Both prioritize individual autonomy, but the former also emphasize mutual dependence while the latter do not do so. Okay, there was a point about mutualism, if you remember. We'll go back. It says the former emphasizes mutual dependence while the latter does not do so. So individual anarchists emphasizes mutual dependence, whereas free market liberals does not do that, and both prioritize individual autonomy. Okay, this looks like a likely option. Let's go back and check. Okay, what does it say? How do they differ? They differed from free market liberals in their absolute mistrust of capitalism and their emphasis on mutualism. So who emphasized on mutualism? Individualist anarchists. And they were different because liberals didn't emphasize on mutualism, is what the option is telling you. Former also emphasize mutual dependence while the latter do not do so. So the difference part is correct here. But did both prioritize individual autonomy is what you need to confirm. Okay? Definitely individualist anarchists definitely prioritize individual autonomy. We know that. But did free market liberals also do that? Let's look at it. See, look at the way the paragraph is structured. Okay? The paragraph talks about individualist anarchism, arguing that protecting our own autonomy and associating with others is all good. So it talks about individual autonomy. Then it goes on to say these thinkers differed from free market liberals in these two aspects. They differed from them in these aspects. They're specifically mentioning it. So that means you can infer that both were okay when it came to autonomy. It doesn't directly say that. This is an inference that you'll have to draw. Okay, this has to be based on your understanding. So because they're talking about, this is a part of the same paragraph, look at the flow. They talk about autonomy and then they talk about the difference between free market liberals. So we can infer that free market liberals were okay with individual autonomy. Okay, so that means your second answer is a very attractive answer. Let's hold on to it. But let's look at C and D as well. Both are sophisticated arguments for capitalism, but the former argue for the moral upright capitalism, while the latter argue that the market is the only morality. Do both support capitalism? It clearly says that individualist anarchism is different because it doesn't support capitalism. Both do not support capitalism. So this is out. Both are founded on the moral principles of altruism. What is altruism? Altruism is all about charity, generosity. Are both founded on the moral principles of altruism? Does it talk about altruism anywhere within the context of both either individualist or free market liberals? No, absolutely not. So this is also ruled out. Your correct answer is B. Okay, is this clear, folks? Clear, folks? Any questions? Shrup Chatterjee says no. Shrup, I'm guessing you said no for this question. So can you please elaborate why you say it's no? Then I can answer your question. Yeah. So some of you got B. Anybody who got a different answer and still confused? Yeah, Shrup, you did say that option B seems to be right. So I think you were on the right track. One question is it okay to go back to the passage to find the answers? Because it is usually said juggling back and forth is not advisable and one has not read the passage well if understood. Okay, good question. Good question. See, the thing is you have to read the passage first before going to the questions. Okay, so read the passage properly, right? Give it your time, understand the passage and then go to the questions. It's okay to go back to confirm an answer, right? But it's not okay to go back and reread chunks of passage again. When you have read it first, you should have a good understanding of the passage. But of course, questions are going to talk about specific portions of the passage, right? Unless if it's like a central idea and stuff like that. So when you pick an option, you can always go back and confirm it. That's not like you're rereading the whole content. You've already understood the content, you're just confirming understanding. Right? What is not advisable is that when you're reading the passage for the first time, don't go back and forth. Don't read one line again and again. That means you're going too fast, right? And you're not understanding the line. So depending on your speed, go slow, go according to your speed, read each and every line, understand it. Don't keep going back and forth in the first read is what the advice is. Okay. All right. Can you read about liberals being individualists? Okay. See, you have to look at the structure, Chandravardhan. That's an interesting part in this question, right? See, look at the flow of this paragraph. Okay, it's an inference that you'll have to draw. It's not directly stated about the similarity being autonomy. It says individualist anarchism focuses on autonomy, right? That's the main point till they bring up free market liberals. Then they talk about these thinkers differed from free market liberals. So how did they differ? Individualist anarchists differed from free market liberals in two aspects: American capitalism and mutualism, right? So if they differed from them in two aspects, that means they would have been same on the other aspects, right? And the only other aspect that this paragraph is talking about is autonomy. So that's the inference we are drawing. We know the parameters on which they're different, but those are the only parameters there on the different. The other parameters, autonomy, that means you can infer they are the same. Okay? Chandravardhan, is this clear? Okay, I think there's some delay in the chat. I understand. Shrirup, I get it. Yeah, you didn't get banned. There is a delay. That's how the system works. So don't worry, you didn't get banned. It's just a delay that happens if you want to send multiple messages. Okay, great. In the interest of time, let's proceed. So the author makes all of the following arguments in the passage except. Okay, now look at this question. Quickly pick your answer and then let's start. So be careful with this question. So makes all of the following arguments in the passage except. You have to basically pick an argument which is not made by the author, right? Because it's saying makes all of the following arguments except. So pick an argument that was not made by author in the passage. Okay, understand that question carefully. Okay, so feel free to pick one answer. Let's just quickly go through the options. Okay. Now we have to pick an argument which is not mentioned in the passage by the author, right? So basically out of 4 options, there will be 3 which are mentioned, 1 will not be mentioned, obviously, right? So let's look at that. Individualist anarchism is actually constituted of many streams, all of which focus on the autonomy of the individual. Now, is this an idea or is this an argument that the author makes in the passage? Individualist anarchism constituting of many streams, all of them focusing on the autonomy. You should get a trigger. Obviously, we have discussed individualist anarchism. You can go back quickly and you can confirm. So here it talks about there are unsurprisingly several traditions of individualist anarchism, several types of individualist anarchism, and it says one of them derives, second of them derives, but all of them agree, both of them agree that the focus is on autonomy. So it talks about 2 different traditions or 2 different types, one and another. Both of them argued that in protecting our own autonomy and associating with others is promoting the good for all. So we know that 2 forms of individualist anarchism did promote autonomy. Okay, so let's look at that option. Individualist anarchism is actually constituted of many streams, all of which focus on the autonomy of the individual, right? They've mentioned 2, right? And they've mentioned how they focus on the autonomy of the individual. So this is definitely an idea which is discussed in the passage. Okay, let's look at B. The popular perception of anarchism as espousing lawlessness and violence comes from a mainstream mistrust of collectivism. There is definitely a mention of collectivism there. Okay, now what does this option say? Now espousing, right, what it means is that anarchism is promoting lawlessness and violence. Okay, so popular perception of anarchism as promoting lawlessness and violence comes from a mainstream mistrust of collectivism. So 2 points here. Does the passage say that anarchism espouses lawlessness and violence? No. And does that come from a mainstream mistrust of collectivism? There is collectivism mentioned, but there is no mention of mistrust of collectivism. Okay, so this is a likely answer. This is not an idea that has been discussed in the passage. Okay, so let's park that. For anarchists, the state is the enemy. Definitely, we have a point which clearly says that, because all states apply violence and terror to maintain the control. Absolutely. It clearly says that state is the enemy. So this is an idea which is discussed. The failure of the French Revolution was because of its betrayal by the new class of politicians who emerged from it. Now you can go back and check. It clearly says that anarchists said that the poor were betrayed by the new class of politicians, and that's why the French Revolution failed. So this is also an idea. B is your correct answer. Okay, all right, folks, let's proceed. Let's go to question number 3. According to the passage, what is the one idea that is common to all forms of anarchism? Okay, let's think about this. Pick your answer. You have the PDF as well, and let's discuss it in a minute. Type in your answer, folks. Okay. So I'm seeing a couple of deltas. D again. Any other answer apart from D? Great, a lot of D's. Okay, all right, great. So let's look at that. According to the passage, what is the one idea that is common to all forms of anarchism? Remember, there are different forms of anarchism discussed. Okay, what does delta say? They are all opposed to the centralization of power in the state. This is a very likely option, because remember, there is a sentence which clearly says anarchism considers state to be an enemy. Right? So we can infer, that's a very emphatic statement. So we can infer that all of the forms of anarchism are opposed to the centralization of power in the state. This is a very likely option, but we'll have to look at the other options as well before making our decision. There is no idea common to all forms of anarchism. That is why it is anarchic. Okay. Is this true? Is that why it is called anarchic? Not really, but we'll look at that. They all focus on the primacy of the power of the individual. What does primacy means? Primacy means it comes from the word prime. So they all focus on the importance of the power of the individual. Are they focusing on the importance of the power of the individual? All forms? You have anarchist communism, which talks about communities, right? And even in the other individualist anarchism, it's not, the focus is not on the power of the individual. They're saying it's okay for an individual to have an autonomy. But communism, anarchist communism, doesn't have individual at all. So this is wrong. They all derive from the work of Pierre-Joseph Proudhon. It doesn't say that. Okay. So D is your correct answer. You guys are on the right track. Perfect. Let's go to question 4. Okay. This is an interesting question. The author believes that the new ruling class of politicians betrayed the principles of the French Revolution, but does not specify in what way, which is true. The author just says that anarchists declared that the politicians betrayed the principles of French Revolution. Politicians betrayed the poor people. But it does not specify in what way. In the context of the passage, which statement below is the likeliest explanation of the betrayal? Okay, now this is an inference that you'll have to draw. So understand that bit and draw this inference. What is the explanation? Why is the author saying, or rather, in what way did the betrayal happen? Is the question, right? So pick an option, tell me your answer, and we'll discuss it. Okay, so I'm seeing alphas. I got 3 alphas. Any other answer apart from alpha? Great. So I'm getting alphas. Let's confirm that, folks. All of you are the answers that I got were all alphas. Let's see that. So we have to specify in what way the ruling class of politicians betrayed the principles of the French Revolution. Okay. It says the new ruling class rose to power on the strength of the workers' revolutionary anger, but then turned to oppress that very class. Okay. This makes sense, right? The new ruling class rose to power on the strength of the workers' revolutionary anger. The workers were angry. That's why they grasped that chance, which came once in centuries, to do a revolution at the cost of their own life and all of that. So the new ruling class rose to power. So the workers were angry. They did a revolution, and that resulted in a new ruling class. Okay, so the new ruling class came into being because of the strength of the workers' revolutionary anger. But unfortunately, they turn to oppress that very class, which is why they feel betrayed. And the passage clearly mentions that. So this is a very likely option. Okay, you guys seem to be on the right track. Let's hold on to this. Let's look at option Bravo. The anarchists did not want a new ruling class, but were not politically strong enough to stop them. This part, the anarchists were not politically strong enough to stop them. The passage doesn't have any inference like that. Right? This is not a valid inference you can make from the passage. It doesn't mention or allude to this at all. So this is wrong. The new ruling class was constituted mainly of anarchists who were against the destructive impact of the revolution on the market. The new ruling class was constituted mainly of anarchists. Would the anarchists ever become a part of the ruling class? They're against the state. They're against rulers. Right? So this is clearly not true. The new ruling class struck a deal with the old ruling class to share power between them. Irrelevant, there is no mention of this in the passage. So this is clearly the answer, and this explains in what way the folks were betrayed. Right? Because they were oppressed. The new ruling class actually turned to oppress that very class. So that's why they felt betrayed. Okay, so absolutely right. Congratulations, you guys got the right answer. Let's look at question 5. Okay, now in this question, folks, just remember it says, of the following sets of concepts, identify the set that is conceptually closest to the concerns of the passage. So there are several concerns in the passage, right? We have to pick an option which is conceptually closest to the concerns of the passage. So basically pick an option that does a good job of summarizing the concerns of the passage is what you have to pick. Okay, now remember one thing, some students for some reason get confused that you have to look at the sequence here. There is no sequence. There is no 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? Don't think that's how it is structured. There is no sequence. All you have to do is pick a set that does a good job of summarizing the concerns of the passage correctly. That's what you have to pick. Okay, so Kiran says this is the easiest question of them all. All right. Okay, good that you're finding it easy. Hopefully you'll get the answer correct as well. So we will see. Let's check. So I'm getting a few deltas, which is D, and I'm getting some alphas as well. Okay, understandable. I get it. I get why that's happening. Okay, so alphas and deltas is what I'm getting, right? Now these are the two options that you guys have picked. Okay, now first of all, you guys are on the right track. Amazing. So these are the two closest answers, right? And I can totally understand why there is a confusion. Bravo and Charlie cannot be a correct answer simply because the passage is talking about anarchism. That's the main idea. So you need to pick an option that has anarchism. This doesn't have anarchism. This can't be the right answer. So this is, you can quickly eliminate. Now in typically CAT, you'll have two options which you're left with, and you'll have to decide which is the best option. Both might be correct. It's possible, but which is more correct? Which is the better option is what you have to pick. Okay, for every question. Right. Let's look at the difference between alpha and delta. Alpha and delta both have anarchism and state. Okay, so that's the common element. How they're different is alpha talks about betrayal and power. Delta talks about individual and freedom. Okay, now we have to pick based on this. Okay, if you look at a major chunk of the passage, which is the ending, like if you go back, let's go back. The last part. Okay, once it talks about anarchist communism, then talks about collectivist anarchism and the individualist anarchism. There is a lot of focus on the individual in this content. Would you agree? Right? So the last two paragraphs, which is almost 1/4 of the passage, talks about individual. And it also talks about freedom of the individual in owning what they need. So they're saying that individual autonomy is okay. Individualist anarchism says individual autonomy is okay. Right? So it's talking about freedom of the individual to own what they need. Right? So there is a lot of conversation around individual and freedom in a major chunk of your passage. Okay? And you have to summarize the concerns of the passage. So that is a likely answer. But let's try to rule out the other one to just be 100% sure about that. Okay. So this is a likely answer. We have decided that. What about betrayal and power? Okay, there is definitely talk about betrayal. It talks about we had a question on that as well, right? How the French Revolution folks felt betrayed. And then there is power in the sense that the state has the power. Okay, now are these main points? Are these the main concerns? Betrayal was okay. Betrayal is mentioned, but it's mentioned about French Revolution. That's how anarchism came into being. Okay, and power is what? Power resides with the state. So essentially, if you look at these two elements, they're quite similar. Power and state are quite similar because state has the complete power, right? But the main parts, the main points of the passage are anarchism, state, and there is a major chunk on individual and freedom. That's why D is the right answer. Okay, folks, agree? Any questions on this passage? Anything that you want to, before we go to the second passage? Any questions, folks? Okay, looks like there are no questions, so I think we should be good to go. All right, now let's go to the second passage. Of course, we'll discuss that. We took quite some time in the first passage because, you know, some of you are probably seeing a CAT passage for the first time, or you're still sort of in the initial stages of your preparation, which is absolutely fine. You have 5.5 months. That's good enough time to develop your reading skills and prepare for VARC. Second one, we will go a bit faster. So hopefully you've read the passage, so you're prepared. I will quickly take you through the passage and then we'll spend some time on the questions. Okay. 3R2W. Shresh says 3R2W. What does that mean? 3R2W. I have no idea what that acronym means, but I'll wait for him to clarify. Okay. All right. So folks, let's go to the second passage, which is about elephant seals. Now, before we go to that, I just wanted to mention one thing. So 2IM, if you haven't sort of joined a course with us, there is a scholarship test that is going on currently, right? Which you can attempt on our website. And based on this, your score in that scholarship test, you will get discounts up to 50% on our online courses, right? So the higher the performance in the test, it's a scholarship test, right? So the higher the performance, the higher the discount, up to 50%. So it's a great offer that we have running. So if you're interested, feel free to attempt the test on our website. The link is also there in the chat box and description. I think it's a 1 hour test, very similar to CAT, but it's 1 hour. So feel free to attempt that, and hopefully you'll get a discount and join one of our courses. Okay, great. Let's go to the next passage. So this is about elephant seals. All right. Yeah. There's one question which I'll answer. Kiran, can these type of passages come in IPMAT? So Kiran, this is a CAT passage, right? But as somebody pointed out before, these are useful for IPMAT students as well, right? See, IPMAT passages are a little less complex than CAT passages. You can say one level below CAT passages, right? But it's possible that you can see a similar passage in IPMAT. The complexity might be a little lower. Okay, so that is the difference. So you can have a similar passage in IPMAT as well. IPMAT students should definitely attend these sessions because it's always good. The complexity is a little higher. So if you can solve this, IPMAT will be very easy for you. Okay, all right. So definitely attend and then focus on this and solve it together. Okay, let's look at elephant seals, folks. So hopefully you've read this already. I'm going to quickly take you through it. I'm not going to give you this time to read it, but if you want to read it, if you don't want to read it with me and want to read it individually, you have the link in the description box. Open that and you can read the passage. Okay, but I'll quickly go through this and then we'll look at the questions. There were some questions around time taken to deal with an RC. Again, here we are not focusing on speed, folks. We're focusing on comprehension and accuracy. But if you're asking me how much time can you take for a passage, remember you have less than a minute per question. Okay, less than a minute per question and verbal ability is what you have. So if a passage has about 5 questions, you'll have less than 5 minutes to read the passage and solve the questions. That's how it works. Okay, but again, here we're not focusing on that. We're focusing on comprehension and accuracy. Okay, let's read that. This is a very interesting passage about elephant seals. So please, interest, curiosity, and a lot of energy, right? Let's do that. Okay. In the late 1960s, while studying the northern elephant seal population, okay, along the coast of Mexico and California, Bernie LeBoeuf and his colleagues couldn't help but notice that the threat calls of males at some sites sounded different from those of males at other sites. That was the first time dialects were documented in a non-human mammal. Very interesting. Okay, so what does this talk about? Okay, it says that there was Bernie LeBoeuf, right, who was studying the northern elephant seal population in Mexico and California, and he discovered that the threat calls of males at some sites sounded different from other sites. So the main point that they're making here is that threat calls of elephant seals were different in different sites, among sites. So they must have studied multiple sites along the coast of Mexico and California, and they saw that, okay, we're talking about elephant seal, right? Same animal, but the threat calls are different among different sites. So multiple sites, the threat calls of males are different. And that was the first time dialects were documented in a non-human mammal. It's a very interesting point, right? Humans, of course, we have different dialects, different languages. Within languages also, we have different dialects. But this was the first time where they discovered different dialects in a non-human mammal, right? So that is the main point of the first paragraph. Now, all the northern elephant seals that exist today, all the northern elephant seals that exist today are descendants of the small herd that survived on Isla Guadalupe. Now, I'm butchering the proper noun, but it's basically a small island that they're talking about. So Isla is nothing but a short form of an island. So all the northern elephant seals that exist today are descendants of the small herd that survived on this island after the near extinction of the species in the 19th century. Interesting. So there was an extinction, near extinction. The species was going to be wiped out. But a small herd of these animals survived on this island. And all the northern elephant seals that exist today are descendants of them. So they're all coming from the small population that existed on that island. Okay? All right. Now, as that tiny population grew, northern elephant seals started to recolonize former breeding locations. Okay? It was precisely on the more recently colonized islands where LeBoeuf found that the tempos of the male vocal displays showed stronger differences to the ones from Isla Guadalupe, the founder colony. Okay, so what is the main idea here? They are talking about this island. Okay, and they're saying that the near extension when that happened, the small herd only survived. Northern elephant seals were only existing on this island. This was the only place that had northern elephant seals. And all of the northern elephant seals that we see today are descendants of this, because obviously this was the only population that existed when the extinction happened, right? Now, as this population started growing, okay, they started recolonizing former breeding locations. Now, why is it recolonizing? Because obviously before the extinction, there was a huge population. So they were present in different breeding locations. Then the extinction happened. All the sites got wiped off except this small island. So once the population started growing, they started recolonizing former breeding locations. So they started spreading into different sites. So their former breeding locations before the extinction, they started growing and spreading to these former sites. Okay. Now it says it was precisely on the more recently colonized islands where Lebeuf found a difference in the mating calls. So let's say, for instance, this island, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they started recolonizing all these different sites, okay, one by one. So in the recent ones, in the latest ones, this is where Lebeuf found that the male vocal displays were different from the Guadeloupe. So remember, they have moved out from the island to different sites. Okay, and in the recent ones, they're saying that this is where the scientists found differences between these sites and this island. Okay, remember they originated from the founder colony was this island. Okay, that's the point of this paragraph. Let's move on. In order to test the reliability of these dialects over time, Lebeuf and other researchers visited Ano Nuevo Island in California, the island where males showed the slowest pulse rate in their calls. Okay, now interesting. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to test the reliability of these dialects over time. They discovered that there was a dialect. Okay, but they wanted to make sure that the discovery is correct. So what they did was they tested the reliability of these dialects over time. Right? They took a time period and they tested if the dialects do exist or do they keep changing over this time period. Okay, this will become clear in the next sentence. So other researchers visited this island in California, the island where males showed the slowest pulse rate in their calls every winter from 1968 to 1972. So from 1968 to 1972, every winter, okay, they visited this island to check if the dialects are changing or not, because they wanted to check the reliability. Okay, and it also says that this island had the slowest pulse rate in calls. Remember, we know that different sites are showing different dialects. Okay, we saw that in the previous paragraph. This site is showing the slowest pulse rates. So to check that, they went every winter from 1968 to 1972. Okay, now what did they find? What we found is that the pulse rate increased each year, but it still remained relatively slow compared to the other colonies we had measured in the past. So what does this mean, right? They have Ano Nuevo, which is the island. They visited this island every winter from 1968 to 72. They discovered that the population of these seals which were living in this island, that pulse rate kept on increasing. But still, in spite of the increase, they remained relatively slow compared to other sites. Remember, there is a difference in sites. Okay, so if you have other sites here, there will be a difference in dialect. So although Ano Nuevo was increasing every year, they were still slow as compared to other sites. That's what they discovered. Okay, all right. Now, at the individual level, the pulse of the call stayed the same. Okay, a male would maintain his vocal signature throughout his lifetime, but the average pulse rate was changing. Now, this is an interesting point. Make sure you understand this. At the individual level, now, which level? Individual northern elephant seal level. Okay. So an individual's level, so if you take like, let's say this time period, 1968 to 72, you have individual seals. Okay. Now, throughout this time period, if you look at an individual level, nothing changed in the individual. The individual maintained the pulse of call. So if you take one seal, there was no change at an individual level, but the average pulse rate was changing. Very interesting. Now it will require you to use a little bit of your analytical skills. How is it possible? The individual is not changing, but the average pulse rate on that site is changing. Okay. Now it gives you the possible reason. Immigration could have been responsible for this increase, as in the early 70s, 43% of the males on Anno Nuovo had come from southern rookeries that had a faster pulse rate. So what's basically happening is you have these seals on Anno Nuovo, okay? The individual is not changing, but the average keeps on changing. That means the entities, the seals are changing. So basically, this is one part. At this point in time, these are the seals. Now, some of them will die, let's say. And then there is immigration happening from other parts. So there are seals which are entering from other sites. So the set is changing. Remember, the existing population of this island keeps changing because there is immigration happening. So of course, if you add new seals, the average will keep changing. So although the individual remains the same, the average keeps changing because of immigration. Okay, and they were increasing. So they also said that the average, the pulse rate kept on increasing, right? This is because they were coming from southern rookeries where these seals had a faster pulse rate. Don't forget the main point, different sites have different dialects. Anno Nuovo is the slowest. There are southern rookeries which has a faster pulse rate. Now southern is, the seals are immigrating from southern to Anno Nuovo, and that's why the average is going up. Okay, so the main point here is that immigration is causing the change in dialects. I hope you got that, right? Because the individual remains the same, but the average keeps changing, and it's immigration that's causing that change in average. Okay, right, let's proceed. This led Leboeuf and his collaborator Lewis to deduce that the dialects were perhaps a result of isolation over time after the breeding sites had been recolonized. Okay. For instance, the first settlers of Anno Nuovo could have had by chance calls with low pulse rates. At other sites where the scientists found faster pulse rates, the opposite would have happened. Seals with faster rates would have happened to arrive first. Now, this is a little bit of a complex paragraph. Let's spend a little bit extra time here to understand it. What are they saying? Based on this, what they saw, right, that the individual was not changing, but the average kept on changing. And they said that this is potentially due to immigration. Okay, so based on this, what they deduced is that the dialects that they saw, the different dialects in different sites, were perhaps a result of isolation over time after the breeding sites had been recolonized. Remember, they went from that island, Guadeloupe, to different, they started recolonizing different sites. Okay, so they are deducing that the dialects are because of the isolation over time. Okay, and they give you an example. So Anno Nuovo probably has the slowest pulse rates because by chance the seals that migrated to Anno Nuovo from the Guadeloupe island had low pulse rates. And other sites might have faster rates, again by chance, because the seals that they got had faster pulse rates. And they remained in isolation over a period of time. So because they remained in isolation, right, Anno Nuovo, southern rookeries, they remained in isolation. That's why they noticed a difference in dialects, is what they're saying. Okay, so the main point here is, according to the study, what they're saying is the isolation is what is causing the dialects to differ. Okay, let's just note it down according to the study. So the study says isolation is likely the reason for dialects. All right, okay, let's continue. As the population continued to expand and the islands kept on receiving immigrants from the original population, okay, so population continues to expand and the different islands kept on receiving immigrants from the original population. Original population is the Guadeloupe island. The calls in all locations would have eventually regressed to the average pulse rate of the founder colony. In the decades that followed, scientists noticed that the geographical locations reported in 69 were not obvious anymore. Again, it will require a bit of analytical skills to understand this. See, we have already determined that the study says the dialects were because of isolation. Right? Now, the dialects were because of isolation. But the next paragraph says that as the population continued to expand and the islands kept on receiving immigrants from the original population, the calls would have regressed to the average pulse rate of the founder colony. So you have the founder colony, okay, which has an average, which is different from the average that they're seeing in different sites. Okay, but as these different sites kept on expanding, the average started becoming equal. So first there was difference because of isolation, difference in dialects. but the difference kept on decreasing because of immigration. Makes sense. Isolation is causing the difference, but the immigration from the original founder colony is causing the difference to go down. Okay, is what they're saying. Understand that. So, in the decades that followed, scientists noticed that the geographical variations reported in 69 were not obvious anymore. So, there was clear variation because of isolation. Immigration started, and those variations were not obvious anymore. So, here the main point is that immigration is causing dialects to disappear. Sorry, apologies for my bad writing. But the main point is isolation is the reason for dialects, immigration is causing them to disappear, is what I want you to understand from these paragraphs. Okay, final one. In the early 2010s, while studying, so we have come from early 70s to early 2010s. So that was the past, this is more recent. While studying northern elephant seals on Ano Nuevo, same island, researcher Caroline, another Caroline Casey, noticed too that what LaBouffe had heard decades ago was not what she heard now. This is fine. LaBouffe was saying that there was difference in dialects due to isolation. That was in the 70s. Then the immigration started happening, so that difference disappeared, which is what Casey found. Okay. By performing more sophisticated statistical analysis on both sets of data, Casey and LaBouffe confirmed that dialects existed back then but had vanished. This is again sort of reiterating the point mentioned before because of immigration. Yet, there are other differences between the males from the late 1960s and their great-great-grandsons. Modern males exhibit more individual diversity and the calls are more complex. So what Casey is saying is that the dialects did disappear, okay, because of immigration. But what she's saying is modern males, the males that she found on Ano Nuevo in 2010, they exhibit more individual diversity and the calls are more complex than their 1970s descendants. Okay, so while 50 years ago the drumming pattern was quite simple and the dialects denoted just a change in tempo, Casey explained that calls recorded today have complex structures, sometimes featuring doublets or triplets. So the main idea here is that the dialects disappeared. Okay, so they were pretty much the same, but if you compare 1970 to 2010, right, X and Y is more complex and this was simpler. Okay, all right. Now, if you look at the main idea of this passage, right, look at the flow. So it starts by, it's all about the northern elephant seal population, obviously, right? So basically the main idea here is, it talks about how there was a founder colony. Okay, they recolonized different locations. Initially, the dialects were the same, were different because of isolation. That's what LaBouffe noticed, that they were different, and this was the first time they were documented in a non-human mammal. But that difference slowly started disappearing because of immigration. And in the end, when Casey did her study, she said that the dialects have disappeared, which is fine. But the 2010 seals exhibited more complex patterns than the seals in 1970, is what the passage is saying. All right, all good. Can we start discussing questions, or there is a specific part that you want to understand? If there is a specific part that confused you, please type that and I'm more than happy to explain that. And remember, this passage is quite difficult. Okay. In fact, both the passages that we have seen today were of medium to difficulty level in CAT 2020. And elephant seals is more difficult to understand than anarchy because of the whole sort of like analysis that you need in this passage. Okay, so is this fairly clear, or is there something that you want me to repeat? Any questions, folks? Any questions about the passage, or should we go to questions? Okay, so Swastik says, I felt anarchy to be more difficult than this, sir. It's absolutely fine. See, Swastik, it will differ from individual to individual, right? Based on what topic are you more comfortable with, what content are you more comfortable with. So it's absolutely fine. See, anarchy, I agree, the language in anarchy was probably more complex than elephant seals. But elephant seals does require you to use a little bit of analytical skills, right? Because the whole thing of the island, then the recolonization happens, then Labouf saying that, okay, the dialects are because of isolation, then immigration happens, the dialects disappear, but at the end, there are still more, 2010 is more complex than 1970. So there are different angles here. So the language is simpler, but if from an analytical point of view, it requires more thought than the anarchy passage. But it's absolutely fine if you found this easier. Okay. All right, let's look at questions, folks. I don't think there are questions. You don't have questions, so we can look at the questions of this passage. All right. Which one of the following conditions, if true, okay, which one of the following conditions, if true, could have ensured that male northern elephant seal dialects did not disappear? Interesting question. Okay. Now, by this time, you should have understood that there were dialects before when Labouf studied, and then the dialects disappeared. Okay. Why did the dialects disappear? Because of immigration. Is that correct? Okay. Now, what this question is asking you is, which of the following conditions, if true? So, assume that these options are true. Which one of them could have ensured that the male northern elephant seal dialects did not disappear? So they disappeared, but you have to pick an option which could have ensured that these dialects don't disappear. Okay, look at the options, pick your answer, and then we'll discuss it. Nikunj, I'll answer your question after we've discussed this particular question one. Okay, so just hold on to that. Let's have some answers, folks, if you guys are ready. I have seen one delta. Any other answers? Okay, so Ritik says alpha. All right, so we have one delta and one alpha. Delta again. Let's have a couple more answers. Okay, all right. So let's discuss this, folks. So I have seen, let me look at the answers. So there is delta, alpha, and bravo. Okay, all right. So delta seems to be the common one, but there is one answer which said alpha and a couple of answers that said bravo. Okay, let's look at this. Okay, Which one of the following conditions, if true, could have ensured that male northern elephant seal dialects did not disappear? Now, what we understand is that immigration is the reason why the dialects disappear. Everybody should be clear about this. Otherwise, you can go back and read the passage and figure that out. That's an important point here. Okay. And immigration happened from where? So we had the Guadeloupe Island, right? I'm sure I'm pronouncing this wrong. This was the founder colony. Okay. And you had new sites which were recolonized. And eventually what happened is the original population from the founder colony immigrated to these sites, kept on immigrating. And that's why at the end, the differences started to disappear. So these sites started sounding more and more like the founder colony because they were getting seals from there. So the average sort of started becoming the same as the founder colony, and then the dialects disappeared, is what we've understood. Okay. All right. Let's look at alpha. Okay. You have to pick an option which could have ensured that the dialects did not disappear. They have disappeared. We have to pick an option that would have ensured that it did not disappear. Okay. Besides this island, there was one more surviving colony with the same average male called tempo from which no migration took place. Okay. Now, number one, the dialects disappeared because of migration. Okay. Right. Now we have to say that if we have to choose an option where the dialects did not disappear, so immigration is causing the dialects to disappear. If there is no immigration, then chances are that the dialects will not disappear. Okay. So this seems like an attractive option. Okay. No migration. But think about this. Besides Isla Guadeloupe, there was one more surviving colony with the same average male called tempo as this island from which no migration took place. Great. So the second colony didn't have any migration. But what about this founder colony? The migration still happened from there. The option is just saying that we have an additional colony with the same average male called tempo, but no migration happened from the second colony. Great. Fantastic. But the migration is still happening from this island. And migration is what's causing the dialects to disappear. So therefore, even if there's a second colony, it won't have an influence because Guadeloupe will still continuing migrating. So the dialects are still going to disappear. That is why A is not the correct answer. Let's look at Bravo. The call tempo of individual male seals in host colonies changed to match the average call tempo of immigrant male seals. Okay. All right. Now, let's understand this. The call tempo of individual male seals in host colonies changed to match the average call tempo of immigrant male seals. Immigration was happening from the founder colony to the different sites. Now, when they're saying host colonies, they mean this part. Okay. So, as the immigration is happening, they're saying the call tempo of individual male seals in the host colonies is changing to match the average of this. Do you get this? Is this clear, folks? The individual male seals in the host colonies here, they are changing to match the average of the immigrant call seals. Okay, so this is a likely option. Let's hold on to it. C is besides this island, there was one more founder colony with the same average from which male seals migrated to various other colonies. Again, if you increase the migration, then the disappearance is more likely. So this can't be the correct option. Okay. The call tempo of individual immigrant male seals changed to match the average tempo of resident male seals in the host colony. So what is this saying? Okay, the call tempo of individual immigrant male seals. So what is immigrating is changing to match the average tempo of resident male seals. Remember one thing, they are different. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is different from the founder colony. Because you're having immigration here, it's changing because they're becoming similar to the founder colony. Now, if the call tempo of immigrants change to match the resident male seals, will it disappear? The immigrant seals are adapting to the newer sites, not the other way around. So option delta is telling you the immigrant seals adapt to the newer sites. So the immigrant seals change, not the host colonies. And if the immigrant seals change, and adapt to the newer colonies, that means the newer colonies will retain their difference. And if they retain their difference, the dialects will not disappear. Okay, so B and D, Bravo and Delta, are essentially talking about the opposite. The correct answer is Delta. Bravo is just there to confuse you. Is this clear, folks? Folks who picked Alpha, Alpha and Bravo, do you understand why it's not the correct answer? Okay, looks like you guys are clear. So let's go to question number 2. All of the following can be inferred from Lebouf's study as described in the passage except that. Okay, so you have to draw inferences from Lebouf's study. Okay, so we'll go back and look at what Lebouf's study was. But it's saying all of the following can be inferred from the study except. So you have to pick an option that cannot be inferred from Lebouf's study. Okay, and this should answer Nikunj's question as well. So Nikunj was asking, why are the dialects occurring because of isolation? Was the question. So let's look at what Lebouf's study was all about. Okay, let's focus on that. See, this is where they talk about Lebouf's study, right? That's what they did. So in order to test the reliability of these dialects over time, Lebouf and other researchers visited this island where there were the slowest pulse rates every winter from 1968 to 1972. Okay, and what they found was the pulse rates increased, but it still remained relatively slow. Okay, so this was basically the study what they did, right? So 1968 to 1972 is when they did the study, all right? And then in the next paragraph, they talk about the deductions that they made. Okay, so what they're saying is that Lebouf and his collaborator deduced that the dialects were perhaps a result of the isolation. So Nikunj, this point is clearly stated in the paragraph. Okay, so what Lebouf deduced was, based on his study, that dialects were perhaps a result of isolation over time. So your question is, why did this happen? It's mentioned in the passage directly. Okay, so what Lebouf is saying is that yes, the dialects happened, there were differences between different sites, and this was because of isolation. This is the deduction that he's making in this study. Okay, right, that's a summary. Now let's look at the question. So all of the following can be inferred from the study as described in the passage except. Let's look at option alpha. Changes in population and immigration, okay, had no effect on the call pulse rate of individual male northern elephant seals. Changes in population and migration had no effect on the call pulse rate of individual male northern elephant seals. Can you infer this from his study? What was Lebouf saying? There was 1 point of individual versus average, if you remember that. Okay, let's go back and check that. In the next paragraph says, at the individual level, the pulse of the call stayed the same, but the average kept changing. That's what it was. From 1968 to 1972, when they went back every winter, they saw that in an individual level, it's not changing, but the average is changing. And the average is changing because of immigration. Okay, let's look at that option again. Changes in population and migration had no effect on the call pulse rate of individual. Did the individual change? No, the average changed. Okay, so this is something that you can infer from the study. Okay, so this is fine, but we're looking for something that you can't infer. The influx of new northern elephant seals into Ano Nuevo Island would have soon made the call's pulse rate of its male seals exceed that those of Guadeloupe. So read this carefully. They're talking about the migration. Remember, the migration happened from this island to different sites. And the migration is what caused the dialects to disappear. Why? Because the average of these recolonized sites started matching the island. That's why the dialects disappeared. So what is the sentence saying? The new northern elephant seals into Anonivo from this island made the pulse rate of its male seals exceed that those of Guadeloupe. Now think about this. If the northern male seals that are migrating from this island to the newer sites, if they cause the pulse rate to go beyond this island, how will the dialects disappear? The dialects disappeared because the average started matching this of the island. Okay, if the migration is causing this value to go up to an extent where it's exceeding this island, that means the average will not match, and if it doesn't match, the dialects will not disappear. So you can't infer that from the passage. So this is a likely answer. Let's look at C and D quickly. Male northern elephant seals might not have exhibited dialects had they not become nearly extinct in the 19th century. Is this true? Male northern elephant seals might not have exhibited dialects had they not become nearly extinct in the 19th century. Now there is a particular sentence, let's read that. Okay. This one. This led Leboeuf and his collaborator Lewis to deduce that the dialects were perhaps a result of isolation over time. Okay. So the dialects happened because of the isolation. And the isolation happened because of the recolonization. Okay. So now think about this. This is again a little complicated. The dialects happened because of isolation. Why did the isolation happen? The isolation happened because of recolonization. And the recolonization happened because of the near extinction. So the near extinction wouldn't have happened. The dialects might not have happened is what the option is saying. Okay, so you can infer this. And finally, delta, the average call pulse rate of male northern elephant seals at Anno Nouveau increased from early 1970s till the disappearance of dialects. This is exactly what happened. Okay, Anno Nouveau had the lowest pulse rate. It kept on increasing because of the immigration. But once it started matching the Guadeloupe, the dialects disappeared. This is what delta is telling you. So you can infer this, you can't infer B. So Bravo is the correct answer. It's a little complicated. You'll have to spend some time later to sort of completely understand it. Okay, so one question is, first off, the individual dialects didn't change, right? Okay, only the average is changing because of immigration. Absolutely, absolutely. The individual didn't change. It's clearly mentioned there. I think it's reference to the previous question. The average is changing because of immigration. You're absolutely right. Okay, so that's question 2. Let's go to question 3. All right, now, which one of the following best sums up the overall history of transformation of male northern elephant seal calls? So you have to sum up the overall history. Remember, there are different aspects of the history that we have understood. Dialects appearing because of isolation, dialects then disappearing because of migration. So keep that in mind and then choose an option that sums up the overall history. Okay, so I'm getting a few answers. I think deltas, let's get a couple more. Okay, another delta. Okay, any other answer apart from delta, folks? Okay, all right. Now let's look at delta. Okay, the calls have transformed from exhibiting simple composition, less individual variety, and great regional variety to complex, great individual variety, and less regional variety. Interesting. Okay. Now, first of all, there is this relationship between simple and complex. Did the calls go from simple to complex or complex to simple? It's clearly simple to complex. And if you read the last paragraph, you'll understand. The study that Casey did in 2010, she concluded that the calls have gotten complex as compared to 1970. So they definitely went from simple to complex is what this answer is telling you. Okay. Less individual variety to great individual variety. Okay. Let's look at what Casey was telling us. She said modern males exhibit more individual diversity. Okay. So individual diversity is nothing but individual variety. More individual diversity as compared to 1970. So this also is correct. They went from less individual variety to great individual variety. Great regional variety to less regional variety. This is absolutely correct because remember, the migration happened and that caused the differences to slowly disappear. Now the differences were between different regions. So initially there was great regional variety where every region was exhibiting a different dialect. But because of immigration, it went down less. It kept on becoming lesser and lesser. So definitely the regional variety reduced with immigration. So this is your correct answer. Okay. Now there are three other options here. If you read them, you will understand that they're either saying the opposite or something totally different. Okay. Now, do you guys want me to discuss any specific option? Because most of you got D. Somebody got C, I think. Charlie as well. Okay. Is there any option that you want me to discuss? Nikunj, you chose Charlie. Do you want me to discuss that? Or is it clear? I think we're good to go. Delta is the correct answer. It seems like you guys are clear with that. Let's go to question 4, the final question. From the passage, it can be inferred that the call pulse rate of male northern elephant seals in the southern rookeries was faster. Okay. From the passage, it can be inferred that the call pulse rate of northern elephant seals in the southern rookeries. Southern rookeries is definitely mentioned in the passage. How can you infer that their pulse rate was faster is the question. So if you go back to southern rookeries, yeah, this is where this paragraph talks about southern rookeries. So have a look at this paragraph and choose the option and tell me what is the correct option. Okay, you can look at this paragraph in your PDFs. I'll just go back to that question. Okay, so I'm seeing an alpha and Bravo. All right, so Lingeshwaran has a question about question 3. Lingeshwaran, I'll come back to it. Okay, I'm seeing alpha and Bravo here. All right, any other options? Bravo again, okay. Okay, great. Let's look at this option. So you guys have chosen alpha and Bravo. Okay, all right. Now, before we go to this question, let's go back and read that specific content again. Okay, and the question is that the call pulse rate of northern elephant seals in the southern rookies was faster. How can you infer this statement? So you'll have to draw this from the existing information in the passage. There is definitely a mention of southern rookeries, right? What does it say? Okay. It said at the individual level, the pulse of the call stayed the same. Okay, a male would maintain his vocal signature throughout his lifetime. We know that. The individual remained the same. The average kept on increasing or changing. But the average pulse rate was changing. Okay. Immigration could have been responsible for this increase. So in Anno Nouveau, the average increased. We know that from 1968 to 1972. And we're saying immigration could have been responsible for this increase. As in the early 1970s, 43% of the males on Anno Nouveau had come from southern rookeries. So we know that immigration was happening. Okay. So immigration was happening into Anno Nouveau. Okay. Where they were coming, where were they coming from? They were coming from southern rookeries. This is what this paragraph says. Now, 43% of the males on Anno Nouveau had come from southern rookeries that had a faster pulse rate. So there was immigration that was happening from southern rookeries to Anno Nouveau, and this caused the average to go up in Anno Nouveau. Okay. So we know that that's happening because of the immigration of southern rookeries. Now, what can you infer from this statement? If the immigration from southern rookeries to Anno Nouveau is causing the average to go up, it is happening because of the seals that are coming from southern rookeries. And the extension of that is the southern rookeries seals probably had a faster pulse rate to begin with. So when they migrated, they started bringing up the average of Anno Nouveau up. Okay, that is one thing. And also what you have to remember is that in the next paragraph, right, it says that the dialects happened because of a result of isolation over time. The first settlers of Anno Nouveau could have had by chance calls with low pulse rates. And at other sites where the scientists found faster pulse rates, the opposite could have happened. So they're saying that by chance Anno Nouveau got seals with low pulse rates and other sites could have gotten seals with faster pulse rates. So it's possible that southern rookeries could have gotten seals with faster pulse rates by chance. Okay, so that is an inference that you can draw. If you look at your final question, if you look at Bravo, it says the male northern elephant seals of this island with faster pulse rates might have been the original settlers of the southern rookeries. This is pretty clear. They are immigrating from there and they're bringing the average up. So it's possible that the original settlers from southern rookeries which had a faster pulse rate. So that's why B is your correct answer. Alpha is not your correct answer because it just mentions the migration, right? That is not enough to sort of draw that inference. You need that extra information that's available in Bravo. That's why Bravo is the right answer and Alpha is not. Okay, folks, this brings us to the end of the session. We've already spent a couple of hours. So what I would suggest is that, of course, this recording will be available on YouTube. You can go back, right? If you have found the passage complicated or if you found certain questions complicated, go back through that material again and it should help you understand it. So you just have to spend some more time and it should be clear. Okay. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this session and hopefully we'll see you next week as well with 2 more passages. Next time, please make sure that you read the passages and come prepared. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.